Every day, girls are taught a silent curriculum. Don't walk alone at night. Don't wear revealing clothes. Don't stay out too late. Don't trust too easily. These warnings are handed down like protective charms, meant to shield them from harm. But beneath these well-meaning rules lies an uncomfortable truth. While we claim to protect girls, we rarely confront why they need protection in the first place. We've become so used to teaching girls how not to get hurt that we've forgotten to teach boys not to hurt. This isn't just about individual behavior, it's about cultural patterns. From schools and families to media and governments, a common narrative persists. If something bad happens, the girl must have done something to invite it. And so, prevention becomes synonymous with restriction. But when safety depends entirely on what a girl wears or where she goes, we're not solving the problem, we're shifting the blame. As the old saying goes, we're treating the symptoms, not the disease. Real safety won't come from more rules for girls. It will come from changing the mindset that excuses harmful behavior. In this video, we'll unpack why society tells girls to be careful instead of telling boys to be better, and what it will take to rewrite that story for good. Historically, controlling women's movement has always been about more than just safety. It's been a method of social control. In Victorian England, respectable women were discouraged from being in public alone. Their presence outside was often interpreted as availability, not independence. In modern-day India, many parents still refuse to let their daughters go out after dark, not because they don't trust them, but because they don't trust the world. This is a legacy of fear and control passed down through generations. A culture that teaches women that their presence in public is inherently dangerous, and that it is their responsibility to avoid harm. The phrase, "a woman's place is in the home," isn't just outdated, it's dangerous. It reinforces the idea that the public sphere is inherently masculine, and that women who step into it do so at their own risk. But the truth is, violence doesn't just happen at night or in dark alleys. According to the WHO, 1 in 3 women globally experience intimate partner violence. Danger wears a familiar face more often than a shadowy one. This pervasive myth that harm only happens in specific places and times disguises the real problem, that harm can happen anywhere and at any time, and it's about those who choose to perpetrate violence, not where or when it occurs. Telling girls to avoid certain places or dress a certain way creates the illusion of control, but it's a myth. In 2021, a UK survey following the murder of Sarah Everard revealed that 86% of women had altered their behavior in public out of fear, even though many assaults occur in broad daylight and close to home. Women are constantly policing themselves, altering their actions to fit an idea of safety that is based on an illusion. This mindset feeds into blame the victim culture, cloaked in the name of caution. But here's the truth. If avoiding risk actually worked, we'd have solved gender-based violence by now. You can't dodge bullets by tiptoeing. It's like putting an umbrella over a leaking roof. It gives the illusion of protection without fixing the damage. When we preach caution to girls instead of accountability to boys, we create a world where women are constantly shrinking themselves to fit into a mold of safety, a mold that was never made for them to thrive. Psychologists have a name for this: benevolent sexism. It's the idea that women should be cherished and protected, but on men's terms. It sounds kind, but it's covert control. It's why parents might say, "You're not allowed to go out late," instead of saying the same to their sons. It assumes girls need shielding, while boys need freedom. This mentality reinforces a dangerous double standard that perpetuates inequality. As the idiom goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. These restrictions don't prevent harm. They teach girls that danger is their fault to manage. That if something happens, it's because they didn't do enough to avoid it. That mindset is a poison pill wrapped in the sugar of concern. It leads to the belief that a girl's worth and safety are tied to her behavior, not to a society that respects her autonomy. In the US, studies show that girls as young as 8 already believe they are responsible for managing boys' attention. When fear is framed as responsibility, Girls don't just learn to be careful, they learn to self-police, shrink, and apologize for their existence. This self-regulation takes a mental toll, and it shifts the focus away from real accountability. Instead of teaching girls to be cautious, we should teach boys to respect boundaries, understand consent, and be responsible for their actions. While girls are taught to fear, boys are often taught nothing at all, or worse, they're taught entitlement. The phrase, boys will be boys, is not just lazy parenting, it's a cultural excuse. It tells boys their behavior is natural and uncontrollable and tells girls their job is to manage it. This damaging cultural script perpetuates gender inequality and violence. Consider this. Most school dress codes are directed at girls. Spaghetti straps, shorts, girths restricted because they're distracting. But distraction for whom? Boys. Instead of teaching boys self-control, we teach girls to disappear. That's not equality, it's indoctrination. It's teaching girls that they must shrink themselves to fit into a world that doesn't hold boys accountable. You reap what you sow. And when we sow a culture of male entitlement and female guilt, we raise generations that replicate the same imbalance. Boys must be taught consent, boundaries, and respect, not as abstract ideas, but as daily practice. Because silence in education becomes violence in action. If we teach boys to respect boundaries from a young age, we set the stage for a society where everyone, regardless of gender, feels safe and valued. Many cultures wrap this conversation in tradition. In parts of the Middle East and South Asia, a woman's dress is often tied to family honor or religious purity. But tradition should not be a license for control. In Saudi Arabia, until recently, women couldn't travel without male guardians. In Afghanistan, girls are banned from schools past 6th grade. These cultural practices are not just about modesty. They are about power and control, reinforcing the idea that women must be monitored and restricted. As the saying goes, old habits die hard, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't die at all. Cultural pride must be separated from cultural policing. When modesty is chosen, it's empowering. When it's imposed, it becomes a form of surveillance. Modesty should be a personal choice, not a societal imposition. We should focus on creating a culture where women are respected for who they are, not for how they dress. Media doesn't help either. Hollywood glamorizes stalker-like behavior as romance, while news headlines often emphasize what the female victim was doing, wearing, or drinking. These narratives create a feedback loop where girls learn to fear, and boys learn they can get away with harm, as long as they find a loophole. The media perpetuates harmful stereotypes that reinforce gender-based violence, encouraging victim blaming and creating an environment where women feel unsafe to be themselves. The emotional tax of constant fear is heavy. Girls don't just take longer routes home, they carry keys between their knuckles, fake phone calls, and text their friends their GPS locations. These aren't habits, they're symptoms of a society that treats vigilance as a female virtue. Society expects girls to be constantly on alert, to watch their backs at all times, while boys are given the freedom to move without the same burden. A report by Amnesty International in the UK found that over 70% of women had experienced sexual harassment in public spaces. But the real cost isn't just what happens, it's what girls believe about themselves afterward. That their voice is too loud, their skirt too short, their presence too much. This constant self-policing takes a psychological toll. It reinforces a cycle of fear and self-doubt that limits the full potential of women, trapping them in a world where their every move is scrutinized. Walking on eggshells has become a way of life. The anxiety of not just being harmed, but being blamed afterward is a psychological burden few men are ever asked to carry. Women are forced to live in a state of perpetual vigilance, while the men who could potentially harm them face little to no consequence for their actions. Even when girls report harassment or assault, the system often fails them. Courts ask, "Why were you there?" instead of, "Why did he do it?" In Ireland, the infamous case where a girl's underwear was used in court to suggest consent sparked global outrage, but it wasn't the first time, nor will it be the last. The justice system often places the burden of proof on the victim, making it harder for women to seek justice. In the US, only about 5 out of every 100 rapes lead to conviction. That's not justice, that's impunity. Justice delayed is justice denied. And for many survivors, the ordeal of proving their innocence in a system built to doubt them is often worse than the crime itself. This failure reinforces the idea that if the system won't protect them, they must protect themselves. And so the cycle of silence and fear continues. When the justice system fails to hold perpetrators accountable, it sends the message that it is the responsibility of women to avoid harm, rather than the responsibility of society to prevent it. The solution to the pervasive issue of gender-based violence and fear lies in a fundamental shift of the narrative. We must stop focusing on teaching girls how to survive in a world that seems to place the blame on them for merely existing. And instead, we need to turn our attention to the boys. The real change begins when we start teaching boys not to endanger teaching them empathy, responsibility, and respect for women from a very young age. This is not just about teaching consent, but about fostering an understanding of equality, power dynamics, and the impact of their actions. The key to changing the culture of entitlement and violence is early education. When boys are taught to understand their own power and privilege, as well as the consequences of their behavior, we can begin to create a cultural shift. This shift isn't just about telling boys to be respectful. It's about showing them how their actions shape the world around them, how they can use their power for good, and how respect for others is the foundation of healthy, meaningful relationships. This shift needs to begin in schools, where emotional intelligence, self-regulation, and mutual respect should be as integral as academic knowledge. Countries like Norway and the Netherlands have already taken steps in this direction by implementing school programs that teach emotional intelligence and gender respect from a young age. These programs have seen significant success in reducing instances of gender-based violence. This is proof that a proactive, educational approach can lead to tangible change. When children are taught the importance of respecting others as equals, they are less likely to perpetuate harmful behavior as they grow older. But these efforts cannot stand alone. They must be part of a larger collective push toward a new cultural norm. The saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," couldn't be truer in this context. A child's education doesn't end at school. It continues at home, in the media, in the community, and in society as a whole. Parents must model respectful behavior and encourage open conversations about consent, relationships, and respect. Teachers need to go beyond academic lessons and address the emotional and social aspects of growing up. Lawmakers must create policies that not only punish gender-based violence, but also promote programs that educate and empower both boys and girls. The media plays a critical role in shaping public perception, and it's essential that the media takes responsibility for promoting positive portrayals of gender relationships and respect. The ultimate goal should be to build a world where girls don't need to carry fear like armor, constantly calculating their safety, changing their behavior to avoid harm. Similarly, we need a world where boys cannot hide behind ignorance, using the excuse of boys will be boys to justify harmful behavior. This mentality must be dismantled, and a new framework must be established, one where respect and equality are non-negotiable. To achieve this, we must change the narrative. Instead of perpetuating the idea that girls are responsible for their safety through the clothes they wear, the places they go, or the times they venture out, we must hold society as a whole accountable. This includes both individual responsibility and structural changes that address the root causes of violence. We need to challenge the entrenched cultural norms that reinforce victim blaming and create environments where girls feel free to live without the constant threat of harm. True change means building a society where everyone, regardless of gender, is held accountable for creating a safer world. It means creating an environment where girls are free to walk, talk, and live without fear of being blamed for someone else's actions. And equally important, it means fostering a world where boys are taught from the very beginning that their role in society is to respect, protect, and stand up for those who are vulnerable, not to be a threat. By shifting the focus from what girls can do to protect themselves to what society can do to protect them, we move toward a future where the cycle of violence and fear is broken. It's not just about teaching boys to respect girls. It's about teaching them to actively contribute to a world where respect is a given and where violence, harassment, and fear have no place. Only then can we truly move toward equality and justice for all. Don't go out at night. It might sound like protective advice, an attempt to ensure safety, but in reality, it's an admission of surrender. This phrase acknowledges that danger is inevitable and that we, as a society, have no real plan to prevent it. By telling girls to avoid certain places or times, we imply that the world is inherently dangerous for them, and the onus of ensuring their safety is entirely on their shoulders. It perpetuates a cycle where women are conditioned to expect harm, and their freedom is limited by the fear of what could happen. The phrase is more than just a precautionary measure. It is a symptom of a much larger issue. It's a message that suggests violence against women is something we can only react to, not something we can actively prevent. The irony is that by suggesting such restrictions, we effectively sweep the real issue under the rug. Why are there men who think it's okay to harm women in the first place? Instead of addressing the root causes, misogyny, entitlement, and a culture that condones violence, we continue to place the responsibility on the victim to avoid becoming one. As Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." In the context of violence and fear, this quote holds significant weight. It tells us that merely telling girls to avoid danger doesn't solve the problem, it simply perpetuates the darkness. To truly eliminate this danger, we need to bring light to the root causes of violence, the behaviors, attitudes, and societal structures that allow it to thrive. It's not enough to tell women to protect themselves. We must actively work to change the world in which this danger exists. If we truly want to build safer societies, we must stop framing safety as something that women must constantly monitor and control. We must stop treating women's freedom of movement as a privilege they must earn by being cautious. Instead, we must focus on reshaping the culture that breeds violence and inequality. This begins with addressing the normalization of harmful behaviors and attitudes. It starts with teaching boys and men from a young age that respect, consent, and empathy are non-negotiable values. Boys must learn not just that it's wrong to hurt or harass others, but why it's wrong. They must be taught the consequences of their actions, not just the legal ones, but the personal and societal ones as well. It also means dismantling the systemic inequalities that disproportionately affect women, particularly in terms of power dynamics. Women shouldn't have to limit their behavior, appearance, or movement to avoid danger. Men must be held accountable for their actions, and society must provide the systems to support women in the aftermath of violence. This shift in perspective is essential for creating an environment where girls and women no longer live in fear. Instead of telling them, "Don't go out at night," we must be telling our sons and society at large, "Don't be a threat." We need to create a world where girls and women can walk, speak, dress, and exist in public spaces without fear of violence or harassment. While it may seem like an impossible task, the change is possible. Countries like Sweden, the Netherlands, and New Zealand have made significant strides in creating safer environments for women, not by limiting their freedoms, but by fostering greater equality, ensuring stronger protections for victims of violence, and holding perpetrators accountable. These countries show that it's not only feasible but essential to address the root causes of violence rather than placing the burden of protection on the shoulders of women. In conclusion, we must stop telling girls to protect themselves by hiding or restricting their movements. We need to stop surrendering to the darkness of violence and fear. Instead, we must create a society where light embodied in respect, equality, and justice can drive out the darkness, leaving no room for violence or harm to take root. Only then can we truly create a safer world for everyone, where girls and women can go out at night without fear and without limits. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.